Ladies and gentlemen, please proceed the second panel discussion, Markets, Institutions and Economic Prosperity, chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister in charge of Economic Affairs, Fatmir Bitiki.
Just one second. I thought it will be easier for this panel, but it's quite challenging panel with a lot of good speakers and in front of interesting audience. Today, actually, I have a privilege to chair one of the panels where I think we will be able, after the panel led by Bojan Maričić, the Deputy Prime Minister for European Integration, where we will speak actually much more on what are the challenges of the economies of our country, but Western Balkans as well, towards the path of integration, full economic integration into European Union. So probably we will less speak on the political integration, but mainly on economic integration. And today with me I have Krešimir Bekteši, Minister of Economy, Blagoj Bočvarski, Minister of Transport from the government of North Macedonia, Tomas Boček from the Council of Europe Development Bank, Matteo Colangeli from EBRD, Director of Western Balkans, Jacques Mignan, from IMF, Ivailo Izvorski from the World Bank, and Živko Mukaetov, one of our prominent business owners and business managers in the country, and Bjorn Gabriel from European Investment Bank. Prior to that, I give a floor to the speakers. I would try to raise some of the challenges that all of us are facing ahead. And I will start that by saying that everything should start from our beliefs. And one of my strongest beliefs is that the time for taking actions and firmly walking with concrete and courageous steps towards European Union is now, if not yesterday or the day before. And I want to open this panel discussion with what I believe is the key of unlocking of our full potential as a country and the region. I firmly stand that prosperity, growth, development, and resilience could be achieved through creating strong interdependencies. And I strongly believe that we have to abandon the already established economic approach for creating dependencies and much more focusing on interdependencies as a win-win approach in the medium and long run. This in practice is Europe, yes, because it lies on the EU principles of collaboration and joint action to secure the stability and at the same time the prosperity and growth conducive environment in order to achieve vibrant economies with high performance. And this is Europe now, because only high performance, vibrant economy will bring the opportunities for our citizens, especially our youth, to stay here, building their future, their families in this country. So we are building capacities and creating opportunities and building capacities in the country, strengthening our economies, while at the same time walking the integration path towards European Union. As a region, we need to focus on one single agenda, a joint regional action towards creating competitive and resilient economies based on 4 basic freedoms, which are the essence of creating the European Union. Freedom of movement of goods, workers, providing services and capital. Only through enhancing our joint competitiveness, we can provide higher developing rates of our economies and make them ready for bigger challenges in our quest to be part of the European Union single market. Our action needs to be aimed towards building strong institutions, support and promotion of SMEs, and creating more skilled human capital. I must additionally stress the importance of support of research and innovations and access to finance, which is inevitable on our way towards integration in the global value chains. Frankly speaking, to achieve these goals and at the same time competing each other in the Western Balkan region is very hard to be reached. Therefore, we must focus on collaboration of the entire region to reach the goal, and that's the full economic integration in the European Union single market. Thus, during this journey, we as policy makers have to be led with vision, not to focus only on the economic growth as an epicenter of our economic policies, because all of us in the room know that economic growth is abstract, not the coherent goal or mission. Before committing to particular targets, be it GDP growth, overall output, decrease of Gini index, and so forth, we as governments should focus on economic development, since economic development addresses economic well-being and quality of life of nations in the broader perspective. We must constantly work on the social well-being for all our citizens. Ensuring equal access to education, healthcare, and employment is the starting point for all the Western Balkan countries in order to continue on their path to maximize our potential. Now we come to the key ingredient of economic development, and that is financing. International financing is a cornerstone in the Western Balkan quest for European Union integration. As we will further talk with the panelists, international funds from institutions like European Investment Bank, EBRD, European Development Bank, and the World Bank are essential more than ever to stimulate economic development, institutional strengthening, infrastructure advancement, legal and judicial reform, environmental and energy transition, social development and well-being, cross-border collaboration, crisis resilience, and stability. It is the right momentum for the IFIs to change the course from filling the gaps in the economies towards support of planned and budgeted investment in the countries to the approach which will be more beneficial for our economies, and as it will be an added value of the public financing which will maximize its impact. With the support of World Bank in the country, we were able to create the smart specialization strategy that will be a very useful tool in creating more efficient and effective use of public funds. The British Embassy and Slovakia Ministry of Foreign Affairs are our supporters in creating our National Development Strategy 2023-2043, which is about to be finalized till the end of this year as a long-term development strategy where the quadruple helix, government, business, civil society, and academia, are going to put their efforts in order to define the biggest priorities of the country to be achieved in the next 20 years. All this guided by the UN agencies. Various other IFIs are financing several projects in our country in their mission to achieve the SDGs defined by the European United Nations, which are as well part of our governmental agenda. All financing, public and finances coming from the IFIs, should be streamlined towards achieving our strategic goals in order to reach the desired outcome, and that the economic development will ensure resilient and competitive economies backed by human capital that is ready to take on the development path to achieve competitiveness to join the European single market. Europe, yes, for more competitive region with the other 27 EU member states now. Because Europe now is not complete without Europe saying yes to all candidate countries trying to meet the membership criteria. Thank you. And now, I think this was sufficient trigger to announce the first speaker, and that's Minister Kreshnik Bekteshi, Minister of Economy, my dear colleague, with whom actually we had the privilege to work. It should be said privilege because we started to work during the COVID crisis, and it was privilege at the time to work together during the crisis. But as one of ministers with whom we have coordinated all the development policies and crisis measures since the COVID, I would like to give him a floor with asking how challenging do you see the process of creating policies in time of crisis, but at the same time, those policies should lead towards more competitive national economy in our efforts to become part of the EU single market.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Betüci. Allow me first to congratulate the Minister of Finance, Mr. Besimi, and his whole team for the great organization of this event, which is becoming quite an important event in North Macedonia, but not only, regionally as well, in order to discuss issues that are of crucial importance regarding the prosperity of our country, but as the region overall. I was listening carefully your speech, and I would start from the aspect of the joint actions that most of the EU member countries are taking in order to give the possibility in order to develop their economies, but the economy of the European Union overall. And when we are talking for joint actions, as Northern Macedonia, first and foremost, and that's my impression and my thought, that the joint actions should start from ourselves. The joint actions should start with the increase of the cooperation between all the parties and the stakeholders, which may have an impact, first of all, on the national level, afterwards on the regional level, and for sure in European level. Therefore, economy in general, development has to be the main topic where we all should increase this cooperation and not take the interest of our political parties, but also the interest of different organizations and put them on the first place. When we will talk for development, for strategies, for continuity, there should not be compromise of any aspect. In North Macedonia, we have been working very hardly in order to come up with strategies that have to be afterwards implemented and realized from different governments, different stakeholders, and are in meanwhile changed. And there is not predictability, continuity for the business sector overall. Therefore, I think that that should be our main focus at the moment, especially now during the crisis, where even the opposition, all the Chamber of Commerce's, different organizations would be included in making such a development strategies, including here the strategy of the smart specialization, where we define the main sectors where our country would be focused in the upcoming 5 to 10 years. Why I'm mentioning this? Because the ministers, ourselves, can be changed. All the directors which are implementing different measures can be changed, but the strategy which would have the predictability for the business sector should be followed. And when I'm talking for following such strategies, I'm talking for the sectors which are already identified in our country during the stage of the development of this smart strategy as industries, as sectors which have a great potential in order to be increased and have a positive impact when it comes to the development. We are discussing for the food crisis at the moment all over the globe. And one of the identified sectors, including the academia, including the Chamber of Commerce, but also the other sectors, is smart agriculture. And the smart agriculture as a sector has to be followed for the upcoming 10 years at least. Therefore, through the Fund for Innovation, through different mechanisms that the country has, these sectors for sure has to have the main focus of our country. In meanwhile, beside the smart specialization strategy, which would be adopted within a month from now, and for sure it will be shared first with the Chamber of Commerce and the others, we have to identify also as a country the new export strategy, because the sectors are changing, and we have to see where we have the competitive advantage as North Macedonia in order not to compete only on regional level, but based on the intention that we are having in order to be integrated up to 2030 within the European Union market, we sure have to have export strategy, which would be based on concrete evidence, on concrete requests, demands from the business sector overall. So when we are talking for predictability, I think that's the main topic that we should not have compromise as persons which are leading with very serious and important institutions. Everything that is good and is giving a result should continue to be implemented. And everything that has and is evident that should be changed with an open debate, transparency with the Chamber of Commerce, including here also the opposition. Therefore, the joint actions, and this is my main sentence and my message, has to start first from us, including the government and the opposition, when we are discussing for the prosperity, for increasing the standard of living of our citizens, but also to the increase of the competitiveness overall of our country. Afterwards, we go and have joint actions also on regional level, and why not on European level. But without starting the joint actions, when we are talking for the prosperity overall for the country from ourselves, I really don't know if we can be successful in order to have such joint actions in different levels, including here the EU level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Bekteshi. One of the crucial things that probably is from your speech is that, joint actions are a must. They have to start from ourselves, and it has to be an inclusive process with including all the stakeholders. One of the stakeholders that we have here today among the ministers and government is Minister of Transport, which usually we call him when we want to know how far they have gone with infrastructure investment. So I will give a floor to Blagoy Boshvarsky, Minister of Transport, and trying to trigger him about how infrastructure investment will help not only country to increase the overall economic development, improve social well-being, but how much they will help us in order to increase our competitiveness in our road to the EU single market.
Thank you, Fatmir. Thank you for the invitation that I got today by the Minister of Finance to participate in this forum. When we talk about the economy and the economic flows, the development of the economy, we always crop up the issue of connectedness of the country, because this connectedness, the economy, construction as a sector go hand in hand. And we can't have one without the other. We've seen things in past of how that didn't work when they weren't hand in hand. If the connectivity is bad in the country, economy can't grow with the desired tempo that we all expect. And as a result, the interest of the country and the whole region is to connect with the whole region as soon as possible. When we talk about connectedness, also, we need to bear in mind that it doesn't stop at the borders of our countries in this region, nor does it stop anywhere in the world. Absolutely not. Connectedness means collaboration in the region. No highway, no railroad stops at the end of the border of the country, and that gives us the right to believe that only by having the right approach and good policies and the cooperation policies in the region can we achieve this higher level in our region, and to achieve that level that the European countries have, countries in the European Union. Finally, I believe that this region that also likes to go back on the topics back in history is slowly starting to understand connectedness topics, infrastructure, building certain projects is now getting the desired flow, and we can see that the questions regarding connectedness are cropping up on the surface, apropos what was previously feeding into the policies for the politicians in this region with history by burdening the political space with these topics. And I'm convinced that this is the right way. And when we talk about the joint approach, the common approach of this whole region that the European Union has already acknowledged and merely a couple of months ago accepted our demand, it is a joint request of this region, both the Republic of North Macedonia, Bulgaria, and Albania, and Italy, as a strong supporter for the Corridor 8 as one strategic priority for this corridor to enter the map of the main European corridors. That corridor, up until a few months, was on the map of side corridors. But when we had this mutual approach, when we had the discussion in Brussels with all ministries of transport and communications, presidents of governments, and our other representatives, the European Union also gave us a hand, so to put it. But this doesn't mean that we should stop here. Our next step is to show that this should not remain a policy only written on paper, but we should translate this policy by investing into with financial resources from the domestic budget into building this atmosphere. I'm convinced that we have made the right step, and we are now realizing key infrastructural projects with over 2 billion euros, which are worth that much. Corridor 8, Corridor 10 in the road infrastructure that already started working and will start getting headway in the upcoming period, is in the right time with the right policy in this regard. The railroad towards Bulgaria, which for 30 years by the country is trying to get resources and ways on how to advance it. 2 of the 3 phases are worked on currently, and we are about to start the tender procedure for the 3rd and the highest, basically the largest phase in this process. That's a very important share of the financial resources and investments. They go to the infrastructure and connectedness, for which I think this is the right approach, and this will give us the opportunity for future development of this country and for the region in general. I'm convinced that these policies mean a restart of construction primarily, because this is a very severe branch that moves 25 other branches with itself. There's no construction company in Macedonia that has not been activated at the moment. They're all hired. All companies have a lot of work to do. However, what we can learn today from the big consortia and companies on an international level that are currently in Macedonia and are still working here, this is a chance for us to mature and to learn something new in projecting, in construction, in working with urban projects and procedures, and finally in the construction part, the building part. I'm convinced that this is the restart of construction that we need, and a chance for a big stepping stone to be be made in the development of the economy. New job positions will be open for our citizens, and I believe that today, together, we will be able to achieve it together with our citizens, to be able to build the country, to make better connectedness. And finally, I'm convinced that this connectedness will have a good return in the economy, in the balanced regional development, in decreasing the pressure of the foreign investments, so that we don't want them to invest only in Skopje, in the capital city. We should also move towards the middle of the country as well, and to retain the citizens here. This whole cycle is about to wrap up here, and I'm convinced that the right steps are being made at the right time and in the right direction. With that, I mean that, of course, the infrastructure, the connectedness, I'm sure that they're main for the development of the economy. Thank you very much.
One of the crucial things that was stressed by the minister is that infrastructure investment are important, but even more important is the regional infrastructure as a strong answer towards the speedy European integration. And now, talking about European integration, talking about cohesion and social cohesion, I would like to give a floor to Thomas Bocek, Vice Governor of the Council of Europe Development Bank, whose aim is to support social cohesion in EU member states. So I would like actually to hear from you, if possible, how do you think and what do you think about how it can be done, creating a growth conducive environment, promoting economic prosperity in reaching bigger social cohesion in Western Balkan, especially Macedonia?
Thank you, and thank you for having invited me. I will just specify that we are supporting social cohesion not only in the EU, but in the whole Europe, because the CEB, the Council of Europe Development Bank, has 43 member states, and North Macedonia and all the Western Balkan countries are part of it. So long-term and lasting economic prosperity will come from a competitive, resilient, reformed, democratic region, fully aligned with the values and standards of the Council of Europe and the European Union, and well on track for European integration. It is important to strengthen the competitiveness of Western Balkan economies, help to prepare the countries for the green and digital transitions, make better use of human capital, support institutional and structural reforms on the path to democratic consolidation and EU accession. And IFIs, including the CEB, can and should continue to play an important role in the region in helping to achieve these goals. Of course, in close cooperation with the Western Balkan governments and local authorities, they should provide financing, but not only financing, also technical expertise, and encourage also knowledge sharing. So the CEB, as I said, which has a very special and exclusively social mandate, has provided full support to Western Balkan economies over the past decades in important areas such as public infrastructure, health, education, employment, and it is proud to be one of the most important partners in the Western Balkans for projects with a strong social focus. Now, why is this social focus so important? Recent studies have shown that in North Macedonia, as in the rest of the Western Balkans, people see social infrastructure as a top priority area for the government to invest in. This is ahead of other areas such as energy, tourism, or agriculture. And chronic underinvestment in the social sector prevents the human capital from achieving its full potential and increases the brain drain. And the brain drain is a real problem for the whole of the Western Balkan region, including North Macedonia. According to the OECD, since 2010, an annual average of 30,000 people emigrate from North Macedonia to OECD countries. The main reasons for this are wage differentials, employment opportunities, quality of life, institutional quality. So as a result, highly educated, skilled persons continue to leave the country and the region. In turn, brain drain harms long-term labor and economic competitiveness and slows GDP growth. By improving living conditions and the overall situation in the country, public finance can help to put in place the right conditions and create a strong and safe investor climate, which will also attract private investors. There is a need for further investments in education to improve and, if necessary, expand primary, secondary, and tertiary school facilities. Statistics show a relatively low number of school enrollment in North Macedonia and the other Western Balkan countries, which contributes to inequalities since it affects young people's chances of getting into decent employment as adults. So education needs to become one of the priorities of the governments. The health sector is also very important when it comes to maintaining a strong and skilled labor force. We at the CEB know from our experience in other countries with similar projects that the good health sector and affordable access to healthcare is crucial for adequate living conditions and can really influence people's decision about emigrating. This is why the CEB has provided substantial funding for the rehabilitation of health provider institutions in the regions, but more remains to be done in that respect. So, building on the work that has already been carried out, it is important for North Macedonia and for the other Western Balkan countries, first, to continue to improve education, both quantitatively and qualitatively, and access to it for all. Second, to strengthen further the health sector by improving access for all. Third, to continue to strengthen the investment framework by reinforcing the rule of law. And last but not least, facilitate access to financing for self-employed persons and micro businesses. The CEB, I can reassure you that the CEB is here and remains committed to continuing and further strengthening its cooperation with the North Macedonia and with other Western Balkan countries in order to support them on the path for European integration. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said at the beginning, yeah, you are aiming actually social cohesion. And it's true that investment in trying to achieve higher social cohesion is a must in order to decrease the migration trends in Western Balkan, especially in North Macedonia. Because as we have said previously, one of our assets is human capital. We don't have stronger asset than that. Thanks for your speech. The next is someone that is coming from the IFIs, and through their portfolio, they heavily work in different regions in our country. And that's Matteo Colangeli from EBRD. Actually, EBRD for Director for Western Balkans. I would ask a direct question. How do you, as EBRD, address the disparities in income per capita of our citizens with comparison with those of European Union?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. Let me start by also congratulating Minister Bessimi on this third edition of this gathering. Really pleased to be here. And thank you for the question. Actually, this is really the one topic I was planning to talk about in the sort of rather broad range of issues which this panel will cover. And it's the topic of economic prosperity, which ultimately should be the outcome of everything else we discuss today. So the starting point is that the average income level, GDP per person in this region, is at around 35% of EU average. So there is a lot of catching up to do. And I think the real question for this region is how quickly can this gap narrow and eventually close? So I'm not an economist, but we do have a big team of economists at EBRD, and there is one statistic which for me was really eye-opening. So if we look at the pre-financial crisis growth rates, so before 2007, the catching up would have happened between 20 and 30 years, which is a long time, but a very long time, but perhaps a time which most of us can find tolerable, I think, for any parent to be able to think that their children will have better living standards. But since the financial crisis, if we look at the growth rate from 2008 onwards, if we continue on this trajectory, then it will take 70 years for this region to close the gap with the EU, which is clearly a completely unacceptable time frame for the people and the countries of the Western Balkans. So it is very clear that a major shift is needed. A few gears up are needed in terms of accelerating the convergence process. And it's also clear that the engine for that will need to be faster EU integration. And we are certainly very hopeful at EBRD that good signals and good progress will come out of the Berlin summit coming up in Tirana in October. But while the political process takes place, what can countries in this region do to, quote unquote, help themselves to be ready, to grasp as much as possible of the openings and the acceleration that seems to be on the horizon when it comes to the EU journey of this region? And there are three things I briefly wanted to touch upon. The first one is the green energy transition. I don't think there is any chance for any country to be successful in an EU context if your economy is fueled primarily by lignite, and if you have an energy intensity which is more than double the European Union one, meaning that you are wasting half of the energy per unit of GDP compared to the EU. So on this front, I really would like to be praising the steps made by this country, by North Macedonia. I think this country is at the forefront when it comes to making credible commitments to decarbonize the energy sector. And this is also, by the way, what made it possible for us to make available a few weeks ago 100 million euro of liquidity support to the state-owned energy company. But beyond us, this is also recognized by other players, and North Macedonia is the only country in Europe which managed to secure funding from the Climate Investment Fund, $85 million of grants and concessional finance that we were pleased to support this country in securing. And as I said, this is only possible because of the credible commitments and steps already made by the country towards a greener energy sector. The second point is interconnection with the region and with Europe infrastructure. North Macedonia is blessed in terms of being geographically at the crossroad of two major EU corridors, Corridor 8, Corridor 10, and really should do all it can to advance the many investments, the many projects on the various sections of these corridors so that they are completed as quickly as possible. If there are more money coming from the EU in terms of grant support for infrastructure, then I think it will be even more important for all the countries in this region to be prepared in terms of absorbing them. There will never be an envelope of money for North Macedonia, one for Serbia, one for Albania. There will be one for the region. And the money will go to the countries that are best prepared take it, that have projects which are ready and that are able to implement them efficiently. So we really stand ready to work with you on this, but you should be in the driving seat, and you are the owners ultimately of your own infrastructure projects. And as EBRD, we will be on your side with all the technical assistance possible and needed to help you speed up implementation. Final point, SMEs. SMEs are the backbone of any economy, and including, of course, of the countries in this region. Foreign direct investment is important, of course, but it's important to capitalize on the big foreign companies that come to this country, to this region, in order to create around them an ecosystem of local suppliers to these big investors. And for that, really, access to finance and access to skills to the local SMEs are paramount. We are very active in this field, both on the advisory side. We have a program for many, many years in this region that in North Macedonia already supported 800 SMEs, making available consultants, experts to help them grow. But access to finance, of course, is also needed for companies from this region to operate to the level required in order to be a supplier to a large multinational. And for that, we work mainly through the commercial banks, through making available loans plus grants to the SMEs that invest in innovation. And again, on this front, I'm really thankful to the government of North Macedonia and UNDP, who are donors. They are contributing grants for an important financing facility, the Green Economy Facility, worth initially 30 million euros, that will make available funding, loans, and grants for Macedonian SMEs to grow and become more competitive. Stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that you provided us quite an overall overview on what EBRD is doing in our country and how actually consistently not is helping us in reaching higher social cohesion throughout the country, but how is helping us in wider regional integration towards opposed to European integration. Thank you. The next in terms is Mr. Jacques Mignon from the International Monetary Fund, which is a huge and significant part of the IFRs who are cooperating with our government and its institutions, and normally in coordination with our monetary authorities. So it will be a great pleasure to hear you and to say us a little bit more on this panel, how to streamline finances into achieving strategic goals in our country. Sorry, before that, I think Minister wants to excuse himself.
I want to excuse you, but I have prearranged meetings with the food industry because dealing with the crisis, I have to go and leave, and really I apologize I cannot hear your discussions, but I promise afterwards in the evening I will go through this debate and for sure see what have been even the conclusions, if there would be. Sorry, I have to go because most of our food industry is waiting for me and for regarding the measures we have to adopt together with the Deputy Prime Minister. Sorry, bye.
Thank you, Minister. I think the Minister did intentionally before IMF took the floor to speak because he wants to show how we are fighting inflation in our country.
I'm going to talk about inflation. So, look, the first thing I want to say is reinforce something that Matteo just said. I think if there's one fact that you're going to take for this conference is this. Income per capita here is much lower than in the EU. We know that. Everyone knows that. But what people don't know is that during the 2000s, income per capita was catching up to the EU. In 2000, income per capita was 27% of the EU average, and by the end of the decade, it was 37%. That's pretty good. But over the last 10 years, that process has completely stalled. So basically, we've had a lost decade in terms of income convergence. So just accelerating, reigniting income convergence has to be the number one priority, both towards the citizens, but also in terms of EU accession. Now, Matteo spoke a lot about the structural policies that are needed for that. Green transition, interconnection, there's also rule of law, business environment, all that is true. But I want to tell you a little bit about the macroeconomic challenges and the macroeconomic priorities. And not just because that's where we work. I'm not just doing that because that's what I know, but also because macroeconomic stability will not deliver growth in itself. It will not accelerate income convergence in itself. But without stability, I guarantee you, you will not have growth and income convergence. So let me tell you candidly what I see are the key macro challenges in this economy and the key macro priorities. The first one is we need to keep fiscal deficits contained. Why is this? Well, debt in Macedonia is not very high, but it's not low either. It's nowhere near a danger zone, but as I said, it's not low. So it's very clear that the direction of travel for public debt has to be down and not up. Now, we are working very, very hard with Minister Vecimi, with the government, with Parliament. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy with the fiscal outturns last year. I'm pretty confident they're going to be pretty good this year. But this is a constant battle, right? In every country. But in the Western Balkans, if you care about fiscal prudence, you have to be, like a dam standing every day against the pressures, to increase spending, to increase entitlements, etc. And it's particularly true because, let's be honest, we have elections ahead of us. And it's a recurring cycle in the Western Balkans that before elections, there's large increases in current spending. We need to really be very responsible about that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and more directly, within the budget. Do you know why income convergence has stalled? It's not productivity. Productivity has been disappointingly low in Macedonia, but pretty steady. The reason income per capita growth has fallen is because of a sharp decline in investment. Simply, there's not enough capital, public and private, to sustain high growth. What does this have to do with the budget? Very simple. A key way to increase investment is through the budget. And I'm pretty happy that this year, the capital expenditure envelope in the budget is one of the largest of the last 10 years. That's great. But we need to preserve that. And again, if you increase other things such as wages, pensions, entitlements, subsidies, all that may have its own reasons, but no one can defy the laws of physics. You cannot, at the same time, increase current spending, keep deficits contained, and keep the space for capital investment high. Something has to give. And again, if we want to keep that space for capital investment and we want to keep budget deficits responsible, we need to be responsible on current spending, not least ahead of the elections. So that's a key message, I think. The second one, and I think an important challenge, is inflation. Inflation has come down a lot, partly because international prices have come down, partly because the government has put in place policies, and certainly because the central bank has tightened policy, increased interest rates, tightened liquidity, etc., etc. All that is very good. The problem is that inflation is not coming down fast enough. Inflation is too high. And if we are honest, recent policy decisions like the wage increases risk giving a new impulse to inflation. And this is a problem because, well, right now inflation, of course, hurts the purchasing power of households. But in addition to that, if we keep an inflation differential, if we have higher inflation here than in the euro area or other Western Balkans for many years, that will hurt the competitiveness of the economy. So it's important to continue working on inflation. I'm really eager to see and curious to see what are the measures to be announced against food inflation. But again, the best thing the government can do is avoid large ramp-ups in spending, particularly ahead of the election, that could trigger inflation. As for the central bank, look, it's possible that the central bank has to tighten more. If some of the risks to inflation that I mentioned materialize, the central bank will have to do more. No one likes it when the central bank tightens, but we need to give the central bank the space to do it, because the best thing that the central bank can do for the economy is fulfill its mandate for price stability. I have no doubt that the central bank will do it, and if they do what they have to do, and I have no doubt that they will, they have our full support. So, thank you.
I think straightforward messages. Thanks. I will not repeat, but try to just paraphrase some of the things that you mentioned. In order to reach the income convergence, we have to look on the several issues, macroeconomic challenges, which macroeconomic stability, which will, for sure, as you said, will not deliver growth, but without it, for sure, it will not be delivered. The fiscal deficit is something to be aware and keep it at the level of under control, I would say. And the structure of the budget, that in order to enhance the income convergence, we have to push the state and private investments much more. Thanks for this. The next is Mr. That is coming from World Bank, the chief economist in the World Bank, Mr. Ivailo Izvorsky. I think that World Bank has always have something interesting to say, because the institution that he represents always in our country have some out-of-the-box findings. So when we speak about Western Balkan, and especially for our country, I think the floor is yours to hear something out of the box.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Mr. Besimi, thank you for inviting me to this forum. Great pleasure to be here with you. Let me just start by stating the obvious, that your country has achieved substantial progress over the last 3 decades of transition. We look at income per capita, up 6 times since 1992. Estonia, one of the most successful transition economies in Europe, has income per capita up 7 times since 92. So you've made substantial progress. Your neighbors in the Western Balkans similarly have made substantial progress. If I could bring Albania, has increased its income per capita 11 times. Poverty is down almost by half over the last couple of decades, and the country has opened massively to foreign trade and investments. The ratio of exports to imports, what we call trade openness, is 170%. Together with Estonia, is the largest in Europe, including developing and developed Europe. Now, of course, because economic development is not a linear process, there are constantly challenges, and you have quite a few, as some of my colleagues here on the panel and the previous panel outlined. One of them is, of course, economic growth. In the first decade of this century, when the global economy was booming, the economy of the European Union and ECA, Europe and Central Asia, was booming, growth here was close to 3% or a bit more a year. The next decade, the decade before COVID, growth slowed to about 2%, and now we estimate that potential growth for the economy is about 2%. In fact, for this year, our economists, and Ioana, our economist, is here in the audience, she's forecasting growth for this year that is just a little bit above 2%. This is the growth rate that we, in our next edition of the Europe and Central Asian Economic Update, project for the whole region of Europe and Central Asia. I mean, the other issue that the colleagues on the panel mentioned is that convergence to the EU income levels has stalled. So it was 35% of GDP per capita average about a decade ago. Now it's just a little bit under 40%. This is very, very slow progress. For Estonia, this increase was about 20 percentage points. So clearly, one can aspire to do better, and I'm going to talk a little bit later how that could be done. I mean, productivity growth has been weak and slow, but as my colleague from the IMF mentioned, investment has really slumped. Only in 1 year, 2009, was investment to GDP of more than 25%. And 25% is a threshold that we at the World Bank think as kind of the minimum for the economy to start a much more ambitious convergence process. Education attainment, my colleagues here mentioned, the number of years of schooling is low. But what is much more troublesome is that the quality of education, when we look at primary education, the PIRLS results from reading and mathematics, the PISA scores, they also point to substantial progress. You know, you have a very, very high share of functional illiteracy, kids that at age of 14 cannot read and understand a simple text. So this is a big issue that brings down the human capital level of the country. And of course, human capital in this day and age, and especially for a country at North Macedonia's level of GDP per capita and North Macedonia's ambitions, human capital is extremely important for restarting much stronger economic growth. Now, the path forward, and this forum obviously is squarely focused on that, the path forward is very clear. The main opportunity, the main goal is EU accession. We know that every country that has become a member of the EU has become a high-income country. The EU is a convergence machine, takes low-income countries, middle-income countries, and makes them high-income economies in a decade or 2 or 3, largely through the major flows of structural funds, but also through its trade and investment framework, alignment of institutions, and so on. What is the main lever? And again, my colleagues here have mentioned, it has to be much faster, much stronger, much more sustainable, more inclusive economic growth. It's a crucial point. Without strong economic growth, nothing else is possible. When growth is 2-3% a year, this is not adequate to restart convergence, to meet the aspirations of the people. When it's 7% a year, in 10 years, your income per capita can double. And so essentially, if you have growth of 7 years, in a decade, you can meet the standards of a high-income economy. Now, again, this was mentioned several times, but I think to have this much stronger growth, you obviously need a much more vibrant private sector. You need much more competition in the private sector, and I have to say, you need an economy with much less government involvement, right? Government involvement that is strategic, more horizontal, addresses horizontal challenges, but not necessarily go into every sector and try to guide economic development. I mean, together with this much more vibrant private sector, there has to be the environment to facilitate much higher investment. Why is it that in other countries, even in Estonia, which is now a country, mind you, with GDP per capita in purchasing power parity that is closer to Japan's GDP, how is Estonia maintaining fixed investment of close to 30% of GDP a year, and Macedonia cannot? So I think this is a major ambition here, that fixed investment, which collapsed after the global financial crisis in 2009, has really to go up, and much more vibrant private sector, much more conducive environment for foreign direct investment will be part of that. I mean, third, of course, and I talked earlier, is that besides optimizing the state aid policies and reducing barriers to market entry and competition, there has to be, rapid digitalization of the economy, enabling infrastructure that needs to help companies tap into growing opportunities. Now, obviously, enhancing the quality of human capital, doing much better on education has to be next on the list. There are so many examples in Europe and in Asia of high quality education. You look at the countries that are doing very well on the PISA, the OECD PISA scores, whether it's China, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's Finland, Poland, Estonia, closer to home. All these countries in Europe. Poland did comprehensive education reforms in 2000 and is now the 5th country globally ranking on the PISA score. Estonia is 6th. So there are these fantastic examples that are not very costly to emulate and that would actually be hugely beneficial for long-term economic growth. I just want to say that addressing these challenges and making the economy or helping the economy grow faster would be difficult under any circumstances. I mean, we look at the world of about 200 countries around the world, only 30 countries have become high-income economies since 1990. Of these 30 economies, 13 are in the European Union. This is the convergence machine. The others, only 2 are not resource-rich and not small islands that depend on tourism: South Korea and Uruguay. So it is a challenge. It is a challenge that I think, having listened to what Your Excellency and the colleagues from your government have mentioned, the government is up to the standard of meeting this challenge. But what is going to make everything much more difficult is that the global economy has come down in a very difficult equilibrium. The 5-year projections for growth, or actually the 5-year growth from 2000 to 2024, these 5 years are the lowest on record in terms of growth rates since 1990. After COVID, the countries of the Western Balkans, North Macedonia, countries of Europe and Central Asia recovered rapidly, only for growth to actually come down to 2-3% a year. Very, very inadequate. Not just for your country, for all the countries of Europe and Central Asia. And so all the prospects for the world economy, besides 2020, 2024 being such a weak period, we estimate that global potential growth has actually come down by a percentage point from the previous decade. Why? Less work, less trade, less investment, and a debt overhang in developing countries, but also in some of the advanced economies that now, with higher interest rates, are dealing with very substantial interest payments. So with that, I think you know what to do, you know how to do it, and these challenges would help you, improve the ways so that others can learn from your experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rio. If I may quote, you said progress is obvious in the last 3 decades. Maybe not so satisfactory, but the path forward is clear. EU membership, because it is a convergence machine. Thank you. The next in round is a known business person in our country, Mr. Mukaetov, Živko Mukaetov, coming from one of the largest companies in the country. One of the strong advocates for a more business-enabling environment in the country, consistent that the government should be here in order to create a competitive environment, to create competitive economy. Even though the government has made significant changes in treating the domestic businesses in comparison with the FDIs, foreign direct investors, I would like actually to hear from you, what is your observation, how much is done till now, and what has to be done in order to help the businesses in our country to become more competitive in so much attractive EU single market?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank for the introduction, the Deputy Prime Minister Bitiki and also Minister Fatmir Besimi and the team from Skopje Economic Finance Forum, because really it's a pleasure to be present here and to talk to you. I will start first with a brief introduction about the company I run for 17 years. Alkaloid is a company that exists almost 9 decades and is recognizable and well known through our motto, which is health above all, slogan of one of the key drivers of the Macedonian economy. Our company is one of the fastest growing pharmaceutical companies in the region and one of the biggest in Southeastern Europe. With nearly 3,000 employees in its headquarters in Skopje, 20 daughter companies outside of the country in 15 countries. Alkaloid places its products in nearly 50 countries worldwide. Our main portfolio is pharmaceuticals, chemicals, cosmetics, and botanicals. And during its long history of the company always have shown resilience and fast adaptation to the changes. A special milestone in the development of our company was the project which we went through together with EBRD and IFC. It was building of our new facilities in the end of 90s and in the beginning of 2000 year. With that, we built a new production of semi-synthetic antibiotics and oral dosage forms. And for us, the main point of this was that together with the IFIs, we implemented the strict principles of corporate governance, and it was really an advantage for us for the future. Being a Macedonian-based company, standing in the waiting room of European Union is always very difficult. We had huge production capacities, research and development facilities, cutting-edge technology, and expert personnel on one side. On the other, we were waiting, we were knocking on the door of the European Union market because we were not being there. But we didn't stay here. Our facilities were licensed by the European Union Good Manufacturing Practice in 2007. And from that moment, we become in our industry part of the, let's say, European Union. Our first product, which was registered, was lisinopril, well known as Copril here. And also we needed to invest. So we invested in a chemical laboratory in Ljubljana. So you need to be present in European Union so that you could release your products and to sell in European Union. Today we have over 950 products which are registered in the European Union. Out of 260 million euros sales, about 72% is export, and about 55 million euros are sales in European Union at this moment. So what did we get from this being present in EU? Access to 27 countries, 448 million inhabitants, and what's the most important principles there? Exchange of valuable knowledge, valuable experiences, and partnerships with many European companies. The level of transparency in the European Union market is high. There are strictly defined procedures and business rules, accessible and available data, which can really help you in building the strategy, how you should position yourself in the European Union. What did we learn on this step and rocky path? In order to succeed in EU, one must follow the principles of good governance, compliance, have high and constant quality of the products and the services, and being competitive enough. And now somebody will say, okay, you are selling there. What should be your logic of why we should become members of European Union? I will tell you more concretely why. For 16 years, we're already selling, as I said, in European Union, but originating from a non-European Union country is a challenge on its own. A few years ago, we had the idea to buy a pharmaceutical company in Poland. So we went through a due diligence procedure, and it was really interesting to compare what's our starting point and what's the starting point of one, for example, Polish company. First of all, we are starting to sell our products on a market of 2 million. They are starting to sell their products on a market of 40 million. But we are not talking about 40 million. We are talking about procedure in which, for the Polish company, they need less than 1 year to sell in all the European Union market. And for us, it's a 3 years procedure. Then for external EU pharmaceutical audits, the checklist for non-EU countries in the EU for producers are more thorough and longer than the EU-based ones. We get approximately 10% subsidies from our government, and we are very thankful that finally, let's say, the governments are taking care about the companies who are investing in production, especially in research and development. On the other side, the Polish pharma companies, they are receiving 50% for all their investment as a grants, for all their investments in production, in R&D. So you can see that if we are going on a track race, EU companies would run more than half of the race, and we will just start to race. So from this perspective, you can see, you can compare that definitely if you are not in EU, doesn't matter how high is the level of your quality, it's not so easy to be competitive of the market. As a system which encompasses 2,400 Macedonian families, we are investing extra finances, energy, resources, and valuable time to resolve all these issues. And it would have been much more easier for all of us if we would be members of European Union, and if we would be producers who are present in European Union, and then definitely we could even show more how is the level of quality which we have. There are truly many success stories, I would say, in the region, but definitely if we would become part of this much bigger family, it would be much easier and to become part of this wider European market. I'm truly proud that even the company originates from a country that has been through a lot of challenges. We have managed to globalize ourselves, but still, I think that if we could be inside from a perspective of a future producer based in you, having in mind the quality of the products, having in mind the quality of our people, their knowledge, experience, I am sure the sky would be the limit for us and for many other companies who are present in this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mukhetov. Mainstreaming government and IFI's funding in increasing SME competitiveness is something that you are saying should be enhanced even more in order to reach the competitiveness needed once becoming part of EU single market to not be too small. Thanks. Then this leads to our last panelist, not the least, Mr. Bjorn Gabriel, European Investment Bank representative in our country. Mr. Gabriel, hearing all of us actually talking, and the previous speaker before you saying that IFIs and the government should actually mainstreaming its funding towards SMEs. How do you see what is the biggest challenge of access to finance in our country and at which sector?
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Bissimi, the SEFF team. Thanks for having us. We're here for the third time. Very happy to be here with the bank, and we have already booked our agenda for next year. So looking forward to that one. I do realize that I'm the very last obstacle between literally every one of you and lunch, so I'll try to be efficient. The question is very pertinent, and actually the sequence is perfect in a way, because I think the one single message that I would like to leave with you is how important it is that companies now start greening their business models in order to boost their competitiveness. As you are aware, the links to the EU markets are obviously very strong, and these EU markets, they currently shift towards a green economy, and they do that with quite a fast pace. So there's an urgent need for companies in the region and also here in North Macedonia, obviously, to adapt in order to meet the union's relatively stringent environmental standards and the regulations linked to it, for example, the EU taxonomy for sustainable finance. This will be important to maintain market access in the future, obviously, to diversify that market access. It will also be important to integrate this way and to continue to integrate into the European value chains and ultimately boost competitiveness. Now, this seems to be, self-evident in a way. Unfortunately, it isn't. We see in the regular surveys that we do together with IMF colleagues and EBRD colleagues that there's a dilemma. On one hand, we have firms perceiving a lack of incentive to actually make green investments into their businesses. The survey, for example, shows that only 1/5 of all surveyed SMEs invest in energy efficiency. It also shows that of those who don't invest in climate action measures, that more than 60% of them don't even consider such investments priority for the future. So there is a lack of awareness on the side of the firms. And on the other hand, we see that in the financial sector, access to finance and credit supply has further tightened during the first quarter of this year. So that in a way requires a market intervention to overcome this sort of tit-for-tat situation. And such market intervention ideally does two things. It encourages the banks to lend more and to provide more capital. And on the other hand, it works and raises the awareness of managers of firms as to why they should green their business models and how they can do that through specific investments. And this is in particular what we're up to here in North Macedonia. We're trying to achieve exactly that. We do have a long-standing cooperation for SME finance with the Development Bank of North Macedonia already for 12 years. A rather, how would I say, efficient and effective partnership model. which allowed us so far to support more than 2,300 businesses with more than €500 million, I'd say. And we're now using this partnership model to pivot it towards green finance. Just in July, we signed a green credit line that is now available through commercial banks to SMEs in the country for climate action investments. The credit line has a value of around €100 million. And just now, during the coffee break, we signed a technical assistance agreement also with DBNM that has two components. First of all, it focuses on the financial sector and commercial banks to help with due diligence processes, portfolio management, etc., regarding green finance, and more importantly also to work with companies, SMEs, in order to help them, possibly even through energy audits, for example, to establish concrete investment measures that they could cast into a proposal in order to consult the banks. So this is how we're trying to overcome this challenge. The partnership with DBNM, as I mentioned, has proven very effective over the years. We're very proud of that. You will see that in future that also other development financiers will use this implementation architecture to support SMEs. I think for the country, this is a very good sign because it essentially shows the appreciation also of international development financiers for the National Promotional Bank and its ability to help the government steer economic reforms and to work towards economic prosperity. So that's the message. Greening business models, super important. That's also one of our focus areas. EBRD colleagues working on this as well, also in other constituencies. Further efforts are, of course, needed at many levels with many stakeholders to align with the ever-evolving EU sustainability requirements. I assure you that as EU Bank and EU Climate Bank, we're there to help, to assist. We're fully mobilized, and we will do so, obviously, with all our public and private sector partners in the country and also our peer institutions who are here today in Skopje. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gabriel. I think it was an excellent closure of our panel. I would like to thank all the panelists, speakers, and the audience for being patient, even though we took like 20 minutes out of your lunch break, but previously they took from us, so we are even. Thanks.
Thank you for being a part of this panel discussion. We would like to invite you on a lunch break. Rest shortly and move on to the next subjects.